The real conversation happened 2 evenings before the housewarming. He didn't ask me to sit down. He didn't say we needed to discuss something important. He simply announced it while checking messages on his phone. Mom, Dad, and Kevin will be here Saturday morning. I stared at him. You mean for the party? No. He looked up. They're moving in. I felt like I'd missed several pages of the conversation. What are you talking about? They'll be living here. You never asked me. I didn't need to. I stood slowly. You absolutely needed to. He sighed. Sheila, stop making this difficult. I'm making it difficult. They're family. So am I. They need us. We can help them without moving everyone into my home. Our home. No. I corrected quietly. The ranch I bought. His jaw tightened. There you go again. What does that mean? You always have to remind people you paid for it. I've never once brought that up until now. Because now you're acting like it gives you control. It gives me a voice. You already have one? No, I replied. Apparently I don't. Less than an hour later, my phone began ringing. His mother, I answered. Hi, Linda. Oh, sweetheart, she said warmly. Thank you so much for opening your beautiful ranch to us. I frowned. What do you mean? Daniel told us everything. Everything? She continued before I could respond. We've already started packing. Richard is so excited. Kevin finally feels hopeful again. I closed my eyes. He told you I'd agreed. There was a pause. Of course. I looked toward the living room where Daniel was watching television as if nothing unusual had happened. My chest tightened. No, I said softly. We haven't agreed to anything. Silence. Linda sounded confused. Oh, Daniel said she didn't finish. Instead, she quickly changed the subject. Well, we'll see you Saturday. The call ended. I stared at my phone for several seconds. Daniel hadn't just ignored my opinion. He had spoken for me. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone believed I had willingly invited them. Maybe they weren't manipulating Daniel. Maybe they were simply trusting him. But one question kept bothering me. Why was he so certain I would never stop him? The answer came just before midnight. I walked past his office on my way to the kitchen. His door was slightly open. Kevin's voice came through the speakerphone. You really think she'll let all three of us move in? Daniel laughed. She won't have a choice. What if she says no? Once you're all here, she'll cave. She always does. Kevin laughed with him. I appreciate this man. No problem, Daniel replied. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll already be done. I stood completely still outside the door. Every doubt disappeared. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication. It was a strategy. And Daniel had built that strategy around one assumption, that I would never stand up for myself. The next morning, I tried to focus on work. I lasted exactly 23 minutes. Every email blurred together because my mind kept returning to the same sentence. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll already be done. Daniel wasn't trying to solve a family problem. He was trying to create a permanent situation before I could stop him. If his parents and brother moved into the ranch, every conversation afterward would become about forcing me to look heartless if I wanted my own home back. That wasn't generosity. It was pressure disguised as compassion. I wasn't going to let that happen. The housewarming was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Nearly everyone important in our lives had accepted the invitation. Neighbors from surrounding ranches, my coworkers from the engineering firm, friends we'd known for years. Even the previous owner planned to stop by and see how we were settling in. I hoped the day would celebrate the dream I'd spent 12 years building. Daniel had other plans. Without saying a word to me, he posted on social media. Excited to welcome my parents and little brother to their new forever home this weekend. Family always comes first. The comments flooded in. You're such a good son. What a blessing for your parents. Kevin is lucky to have you. People praised Daniel for a decision he had never earned the right to make. Not one of them knew I had never agreed. That afternoon, we stopped by a local feed store to pick up supplies for the ranch. It should have been a quick errand. Instead, it became another performance. Mr. Reynolds, who owned the neighboring ranch, spotted us near the checkout. Daniel, he said with a grin. Heard your folks are moving in. Daniel smiled proudly. That's the plan. Mr. Reynolds shook his hand. Good man. Not everybody takes care of family like that anymore. Daniel accepted the compliment without hesitation. Then he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Sheila's been wonderful about it. I forced a polite smile. Before I could speak, another customer joined the conversation. You're a lucky woman, she said to me. A husband who puts family first is hard to find. I opened my mouth. Daniel gently squeezed my shoulder. She's still adjusting to sharing such a big place. Everyone laughed except me. The laughter wasn't cruel. That somehow made it worse. Every person standing there believed I supported a decision that had been forced on me. No one realized I had become a spectator in my own life. As we walked back to the truck, I finally pulled my arm away. You embarrass me. Daniel frowned. How? You spoke for me again. I was keeping things positive. You lied. He sighed loudly. You really need to stop making everything into a battle. I'm asking for basic respect. You'll get over this. No. He looked surprised. What? I said no. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. Then he climbed into the truck without another word. Instead of driving back to the ranch, I turned into a parking lot across town. Daniel looked up from his phone. What are we doing here? I have an appointment. With who? My attorney. His expression changed immediately. Seriously? Yes. For what? To understand my rights? He laughed once. You're overreacting. Maybe. I opened the door, but I'd rather know than assume. An hour later, I sat across from attorney Melissa Grant with a folder containing every document from the ranch purchase. She read quietly for several minutes before looking up. Mrs. Carter, who paid for this property? I did. The down payment? I did. The mortgage? It's solely in my name, she nodded. And the deed? My name only. Melissa closed the file. Then legally, this ranch belongs to you. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying eased from my shoulders. I need to ask something. Go ahead. If my husband invites people to live there without my permission, do they have any legal right to move in? She answered without hesitation. No, I let out a slow breath. What if I simply allow them to stay temporarily? Her expression became more serious. I wouldn't recommend that. Why? Because once people establish residency, removing them can become far more complicated depending on the circumstances. I leaned forward. So stopping it before they move in is important. It's the safest course. I nodded slowly. Melissa folded her hands. I also recommend documenting everything from this point forward. Every text, every email, every conversation. I suddenly understood why this wasn't just a disagreement between spouses anymore. It was about protecting something I had spent over a decade earning. Before I left, Melissa slid a document across her desk. If you decide to restrict occupancy, we can prepare everything today. I looked down at the paperwork, then back at her. I'd like to move forward. She smiled faintly. I thought you might. For the first time since Daniel made his announcement, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, clarity. When I arrived home that evening, cardboard boxes were already stacked inside the garage. I hadn't ordered them. Shipping labels covered each one. Richard Carter, Linda Carter, Kevin Carter. My stomach tightened. They had started sending their belongings to my ranch before anyone had even asked me. Daniel walked into the garage carrying another package. There you are, he said cheerfully. Good timing. He pointed toward the boxes. They're getting a head start. I looked at him. You never told them to wait. There was nothing to wait for. There was my answer. He shrugged. I already knew what it would be. I stared at the growing pile of boxes. Then I looked back at him. No, he didn't know my answer. Not yet. That evening, I signed the final documents at Melissa's office. As she handed me the completed paperwork, she smiled. Now you're protected. Before sunrise, I put the final piece of my plan into motion. The first moving truck rolled toward the ranch just after 8 Saturday morning. I stood at the entrance with a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a folder tucked beneath my arm. The morning air was cool, but my pulse was steady. Everything I needed had already been done. Daniel had no idea. Behind me, the new electronic security gate stretched across the driveway. The keypad had been installed before dawn. Fresh property signs clearly marked the entrance. A ranch manager I'd hired the previous evening stood beside the gate with 2 employees reviewing a clipboard. Every instruction had been given. Every document had been signed. Every loose end had been tied down. All that remained was for Daniel to arrive. The convoy turned onto the gravel road. Daniel drove the lead pickup with a smile I hadn't seen in days. Behind him came a moving truck packed with furniture. Another carried boxes. A third pulled a trailer loaded with equipment. His parents waved the moment they spotted me. Linda rolled down her window. "Good morning, sweetheart." I smiled politely. "Morning." She looked toward the closed gate. "Oh, is it malfunctioning?" Before I could answer, Daniel parked, climbed out, and walked confidently toward the keypad. He pressed several buttons. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. He looked back at me. "Open it." "No." He laughed. "Very funny. I'm not joking." The smile vanished from his face. "What are you doing?" Daniel demanded. "I'm protecting my property." He stared at me as if I had spoken another language. "My parents are moving in today." "No, they already packed." "I know. The trucks are here. I can see them." He took another step toward me. "We've been through this." "No," I replied calmly. "And you've been talking." "I've been listening." His voice grew louder. "Open the gate. I'm not authorizing anyone to move in. You can't seriously be doing this." "I am." Behind him, Linda stepped out of the truck, looking confused. Richard followed more slowly. Kevin climbed out last, glancing nervously between us. Linda forced a smile. "Sheila, what's going on?" Before I could answer, Daniel cut in. "She's overreacting." "No," I said. Daniel ignored me. "We'll get inside in a minute." I looked directly at Linda. I never agreed to anyone moving into the ranch. Silence settled over the driveway. Linda blinked. "What?" I wasn't asked." She looked at Daniel. "You told us." "I handled it." Daniel interrupted quickly. "No." I corrected. "You announced it." Richard frowned. "Daniel." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's just a misunderstanding." "It isn't." The ranch manager stepped forward. "Good morning." Daniel barely looked at him. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm afraid it does." The manager remained polite. "As property manager, I can only allow approved residents and authorized guests onto the property." Daniel laughed in disbelief. "Property manager?" I nodded. "I hired him yesterday." His eyes widened. "You what?" "I hired someone to oversee ranch operations." "You didn't tell me." "You didn't ask." He pointed toward the gate. "Tell him to open it." The manager shook his head. "I can't do that. My wife is standing right there. I answer to the property owner." Daniel looked back at me. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said quietly. "This is legal." A pickup slowed on the county road, then another. Mr. Reynolds climbed out of his truck. "Everything all right?" More neighbors began stopping. Several recognized Daniel from the upcoming housewarming. Others noticed the moving trucks. People exchanged puzzled looks. The driveway slowly became crowded. Daniel lowered his voice. "Can we not do this in front of everyone?" "You scheduled this in front of everyone." "I didn't think." "I know." Daniel tried the gate one last time before turning back toward me. "This is my ranch too." I opened the folder beneath my arm. "No." I handed him a large envelope. "Read it." He tore it open. Inside were copies of the deed, mortgage records, occupancy policies, documentation from my attorney, and a formal notice suspending his unrestricted access to the property until our marital situation was resolved. He flipped through the pages faster and faster. His confidence disappeared with each sheet. This can't be right." "It is." "You actually did all this?" "Yes." Kevin finally spoke. "Hold on." He looked directly at Daniel. "You told me everything had already been worked out." Daniel stayed silent. Kevin frowned. "You said Sheila wanted us here." Daniel looked away. Linda slowly turned toward her son. "You told us she agreed." He didn't answer. Richard folded his arms. "When exactly did Sheila say yes?" Nobody spoke. The silence stretched. "I answered for them." "I never did." Linda's face drained of color. She looked at me with genuine shock. You mean I found out 2 days ago? Her shoulders slumped. Oh my goodness. People standing nearby began whispering. Mr. Reynolds looked from Daniel to me. So, this wasn't mutual? No, I replied. It never was. Daniel looked around and realized every person watching had reached the same conclusion. He hadn't brought his family home. He had tried to move them into someone else's. His brother took a slow step backward. His parents looked embarrassed. Even the movers had stopped unloading equipment to watch. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. I thought he swallowed hard. Then the words finally came. I thought she'd never stand up to me. Daniel slammed his truck into park, so hard the tires spat gravel across the driveway. What is this? He shouted as he jumped out. I didn't move. Behind me, the entrance to my ranch looked nothing like it had the night before. A brand new steel security gate stretched across the driveway. Fresh cedar signs marked the property line. A keypad gleamed beside the entrance, and 2 ranch employees stood calmly near the fence. 3 moving trucks idled behind Daniel's pickup. His parents stared through the windshield in confusion. His younger brother leaned out the window. Why is the gate closed? I folded my arms. Because nobody moves into my ranch without my permission. Daniel laughed once, expecting me to back down. You've made your point. Open the gate. I don't think so. His smile disappeared. My parents are exhausted. My brother has nowhere else to go. You should have thought about that before deciding where they'd live. He took 2 fast steps toward me. We already settled this. No, I answered evenly. You settled it with everyone except the person who owns this place. His father's door opened. His mother climbed out beside him, looking between us with growing concern. Daniel pointed at me as if I were the unreasonable one. Tell her to stop this. I met his eyes without blinking. You told me my opinion didn't matter. For the first time that morning, Daniel realized mine was the only opinion that did. Just 12 hours earlier, I never imagined our marriage would reach this point. My dream ranch wasn't just another property. Every fence post, every acre of pasture, every weathered oak tree represented 12 years of sacrifice. I had skipped vacations, worked overtime, accepted difficult assignments, and saved almost every bonus I'd ever earned as an agricultural engineer. When I finally signed the closing papers, I cried inside my truck before driving home, not because it was expensive, because I had actually done it. I believed Daniel was just as happy as I was. He hugged me after closing, kissed my forehead, and said, "You earned this." Looking back, I realized those 3 words were the last completely honest thing he said to me. 2 days before our housewarming party, I came home carrying paint samples for the guest bedrooms. Daniel sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. Without looking up, he said, "By the way, Mom and Dad are moving in this weekend." I laughed. Very funny. I'm serious. The smile faded from my face. What do you mean they're moving in? And Kevin too. His younger brother had finalized his divorce only 3 weeks earlier. I stared at him for a few weeks. No, permanently. The room suddenly felt much smaller. You already invited them. I didn't invite them. He finally looked at me. I informed them. I waited for the punchline that never came. Daniel, we never discussed this. We're discussing it now. No, you're announcing it. He sighed dramatically as though I were making his evening difficult. My parents are getting older. Kevin needs somewhere to rebuild his life. I understand that. But this is our home. He shook his head. No. I frowned. What? What do you mean no? This isn't a debate anymore. He stood and slipped his phone into his pocket. The decision's already made. I felt my stomach tighten. You made it without me. He shrugged. Your opinion doesn't matter. The sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because he had raised his voice. Because he hadn't. He said it as casually as someone commenting on tomorrow's weather. I searched his face for regret. There wasn't any, only certainty. He honestly believed I would accept whatever he decided. I spent that evening walking through every room of the ranch, the kitchen where I planned to host family dinners, the office I had designed for my work, the porch overlooking the rolling pasture where I dreamed of drinking coffee every sunrise. None of those dreams included being told I no longer had a voice inside the home I had spent 12 years earning. Around midnight, I walked past Daniel's office. His door wasn't fully closed. I wasn't trying to listen. Then I heard him laughing. "Don't worry," he told someone over speakerphone. "Once you're all moved in, she won't be able to do anything." Another male voice laughed. "Kevin. So she still thinks she has a choice." Daniel chuckled. "She hates conflict. She'll complain for a day or two, then she'll get over it." I stood frozen outside the door. Everything suddenly made sense. This wasn't a last-minute family emergency. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't compassion. It was a plan. And Daniel believed he already knew exactly how I would respond. He had absolutely no idea what I was about to do next. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Daniel's voice again. "She hates conflict. She'll complain for a day or two, then she'll get over it." For years, I had convinced myself that compromising was part of a healthy marriage. If we disagreed over vacations, I gave in. If he wanted to spend holidays with his parents instead of mine, I adjusted. If he bought something expensive without asking first, I let it go after a conversation. I thought choosing peace made us stronger. Standing outside his office, I realized something painful. Daniel hadn't mistaken my kindness for love. He had mistaken it for weakness. 3 weeks earlier, the ranch had felt like the beginning of our future. I still remember driving through the front gate for the first time after closing. The late afternoon sun stretched across the pastures, turning the grass golden. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I can't believe this place is ours." I smiled. "I've dreamed about this since I was 22. You deserve it." At the time, I believed every word. Now, I wondered if he'd already been planning something else. As we unpacked over the following days, little comments began slipping into ordinary conversations. Daniel stood inside one of the upstairs bedrooms. "This room would be perfect for Mom and Dad." I looked up from opening a box for when they visit. "Maybe." He grinned like he was teasing. I rolled my eyes. "You're already assigning guest rooms." "You never know." It seemed harmless. I laughed and kept unpacking. A few days later, we walked through the detached garage. Daniel looked around thoughtfully. "Dad could build a woodworking shop in here." I frowned. "Your dad? He's always wanted one." "I thought you wanted this space for the tractor and equipment." "We can rearrange things again." He spoke casually again. I ignored the feeling that something wasn't right. The comments became more frequent. While I arranged furniture inside my office, Daniel leaned against the doorway. "You probably won't need such a big workspace." I looked up. "I work from home several days every week." He shrugged. "Kevin could stay in here." "My office. He just needs somewhere until he gets back on his feet." I laughed awkwardly. "Then we'd have to convert another room." Daniel smiled. "We'll figure something out." At the time, I thought he was brainstorming. I didn't realize he was rehearsing. I met his eyes. Years of compromise. Years of staying quiet. Years of believing peace required surrender. They ended with one sentence. "That's exactly why I had to." No one spoke for several long seconds. The only sounds came from idling truck engines and the soft wind moving through the pasture grass. Daniel looked down at the papers in his hands, as though reading them again might somehow change what they said. They didn't. His parents looked from him to me, waiting for someone to explain how everything had gone so wrong. I took a slow breath. There shouldn't be any more confusion. Everyone turned toward me. "So let me explain exactly what happened." Daniel immediately shook his head. "Sheila, we don't need to do this here." I met his eyes. "You already did." I looked first at Linda and Richard. When Daniel first told me you were moving in, I honestly thought he'd misunderstood something we discussed. Linda frowned. "There was never a discussion." "No." I shook my head. "There wasn't even a conversation." Richard looked at his son. "Then why did you tell us she was excited?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I knew she'd come around." "No," I replied calmly. "You assumed I would." I turned back to his parents. "Your son didn't ask me because he believed my answer didn't matter." Linda slowly covered her mouth. I continued before Daniel could interrupt. "This ranch wasn't a gift." I pointed toward the land stretching behind me. I spent 12 years saving for it. I know, Linda whispered. I worked weekends. I turned down vacations. I stayed late at work more times than I can count. Every promotion I accepted had one purpose. I looked around the property. Buying this place? Richard nodded quietly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I looked directly at him. Do you remember the day we met with the lender? He hesitated. Yes. You told me not to put your name on the loan. His eyes narrowed. Because I didn't want more debt. That's what you said. I opened another folder and removed a copy of the closing paperwork. You told me it would keep things simpler. Linda looked confused. Isn't that true? I slowly shook my head. No. I looked back at Daniel. You avoided contributing to the down payment. He remained silent. You never offered to make mortgage payments. Silence. You never asked to be added to the title. Still nothing. At the time, I believed you were respecting the fact that I'd worked so hard for this. I paused. Now I understand why. Daniel finally spoke. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered. I held his gaze. You knew the ranch would legally belong to me. He looked away. And you believed that once I owned it, I'd be too afraid to challenge you. Nobody disagreed because everyone knew it was true. Kevin stepped forward first. He looked genuinely shaken. Sheila. I turned toward him. I'm sorry. His voice cracked slightly. I honestly believed you wanted us here. I know. I would have never packed my things if I'd known. I believe you. He lowered his eyes. I should have asked you myself. You trusted your brother? He nodded once. I won't make that mistake again. Without another word, Kevin walked back to the moving truck and began helping the movers reload several boxes they had already unloaded. Linda approached me carefully. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything you didn't know. Tears gathered in her eyes. I raised my son better than this. I looked at Daniel. He made his own choices. Richard walked over next. He extended his hand. I'm embarrassed. You don't have to be. Yes, I do, he sighed deeply. I should have called you before assuming. His voice carried the disappointment of a father realizing his own son had deceived him. I'm sorry. I shook his hand. Thank you. Daniel suddenly stepped forward. So that's it. Everyone looked at him. You're turning my entire family against me. I stared at him in disbelief. No, you are. You embarrassed me. No, you lied. You humiliated me. No, you did that yourself. His face reddened. I was trying to help my family. You were trying to control mine. He looked around desperately, hoping someone would defend him. Nobody did. The neighbors who had gathered near the road quietly began returning to their trucks. Before leaving, Mr. Reynolds walked over. He looked at me. I owe you an apology too. For what? I congratulated Daniel for something that wasn't his decision. I smiled politely. You didn't know. He nodded. I do know. As he drove away, the whispers stopped. The truth had replaced the rumors. Within an hour, the moving trucks turned around. Kevin chose to rent a small apartment in town while he figured out his next steps. Richard and Linda decided to remain in their own home. Neither of them asked about moving into the ranch again. Before leaving, Linda hugged me tightly. I hope someday you'll forgive this family. I hugged her back. I already forgave the people who didn't know. Her eyes drifted toward Daniel. The message was clear. Daniel stood alone beside his pickup. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. I can't believe you choose property over your marriage. I answered quietly. I didn't. He frowned. You did? No. I shook my head. I chose respect. He opened his mouth but couldn't find another argument because there wasn't one left. The following week I met with my attorney again. This time it wasn't about protecting the ranch. It was about ending a marriage that had stopped being a partnership long before I admitted it. I filed for divorce. Daniel initially threatened to fight for the ranch. Melissa simply slid the ownership records across the table. Every payment, every document, every signature, all of them told the same story. The ranch had been purchased solely with my earnings, financed solely in my name, and titled solely to me. After reviewing everything, Daniel's attorney advised him he had no legal claim to ownership. The fight he expected never happened. There was nothing to fight over. A month later, the housewarming finally took place. Only this time, it felt exactly the way I'd imagined during those long years of saving. Neighbors gathered on the porch. Coworkers laughed around the fire pit. Children ran across the open pasture. The previous owner smiled as he watched me show guests around the property. Mr. Reynolds raised a glass. To Sheila. Everyone joined him. To Sheila. Not because I had won an argument, but because I had protected something I earned without allowing anyone else to rewrite its story. As the evening came to an end, I stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee and looked across the ranch. The sunset painted the fields gold. The horses grazed peacefully near the fence. For the first time since signing the closing papers, the ranch truly felt like home. Not because it was quiet, not because it was beautiful, but because every decision made there would finally be made with respect. I smiled to myself, took a slow sip of coffee, and watched the last light disappear beyond the hills. No one ever told me again that my opinion didn't matter.